That note, I'd like to kind of kick into the program here. Of course, introduce our guest speaker. Doesn't need any real introductions because everybody on the planet who's not living in a cave knows who this guy is. Sean Cota, President of NEFI. Sean, we appreciate what you do. We are honored by your presence today, and we look forward to your presentation. And we look forward to you unmuting your mic.
Yes, I've got that now. Thanks, Gary. Thank you for the kind words. You know, I've always had a special place in my heart for CEMA in Connecticut, and it's when I used to do venture work for analyzing the industry and finding out what our opportunities were. The average company in Connecticut was smaller. Their capabilities were much greater. Their sophistication was much greater, even though the size of the companies were much smaller. And part of that is the double-edged blessing of having a government that's been very intrusive, where you've had to defend yourself as a business for a lot longer, and you couldn't stumble through the business and be successful. And the exceptional talent that the CEMA staff has had, whether it be Chris or David or the entire team is really a top-notch caliber, and they really are almost an adjunct to the businesses in Connecticut. And I don't know how you can run a heating fuel business in Connecticut without being a member of CEMA and taking their very sage advice on how to survive. So, Nikki, I've got a presentation. You want to flip over to me?
All you have to do is hit share screen, the green button in the middle of the screen, and it's all yours.
Good. So I'm going to do a quick presentation. There's a lot to cover. We're recording this, so hopefully people will be able to take advantage of it later. I will say things today that will be appropriate for a recording.
I was going to say that you may regret tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the implications of the election are really significant, and the current trend and velocity of politics and the political inertia is going to affect us in a very significant way. So we had the task force. Most of the folks here are familiar with the Kearney work and the meetings that have occurred. We're actually have another set of meetings next week. And I want to go kind of through what their roadmap is. So on that, this is their presentation in September. And we often forget who we are, right? We heat 5 million homes, right? We have a bunch of small companies that are really dedicated, and we're one of the few people outside of EMS that will show up on Christmas Eve when you call us. We're a significant part of the energy market. We do things that utilities just don't know how to do. Our weak point is we don't know how to talk to political entities like bureaucracies and political groups, and that's one of the dilemmas in us moving forward, why the utilities will do whatever crazy idea the environmentalists think of if it's going to be pursuing their interests. So we do have an existential threat. We're going to go out of business unless we recognize a number of things. The threat is real. That was one part that Kearney accurately described, that it's real, and it's probably more immediate than we realize. And as Gary and I said earlier today, this is not about actual environmental results, because we can actually do pretty well with that, and I'll show you that in a second. But the other element is it's about political positioning. Most of the environmental policies are not going to get folks where they need to be, and we can actually do that for them and be the solution. But right now, they only see us as the problem. So we've got to deal with the utilities. The natural gas industry is very competitive. Our customer expectations of us are problematic. They know that we're really good at what we do, but they're not going to feel good about us having an impact on climate. So the threat is real. The threat is immediate. You know, we have basically two scenarios. You know, do we wait to be legislated, go out of business, or be outcompeted, or be abandoned by our customers that think that we're a bad choice for climate? Or are we going to be ignored by the next generation coming in because they don't see the value in what we can do, or we can take action? And Connecticut has been the lead on many of those elements. The carbon reduction is what we're going to be talking about, and we can do a net carbon reduction faster than anyone else. I want to spend more time on this slide than the rest, and I'll fly through the rest because I know time is precious. Here is one of the key elements that we all as an industry need to recognize. The utilities do not want us to talk about this. This is a chart of carbon intensity. Carbon intensity, also known as CI, is, you know, what is your net impact to the environment? The utilities and most of the environmental policy folks at the state level in particular do not they just want to get rid of fossil fuels. They don't want to necessarily reduce carbon, so they prefer to tax it, and they don't want to take into account whether or not that is a renewable source or not. So biogenic is renewable, abiogenic is not renewable. That's fossil fuels. So if you take a look at where we are right now with heating oil, and you compare it to a lot of other things, there's a chart here. Kearney did not include it, and I'm going to ask them to include it later, but natural gas with all of its emissions from, if you take a look at the intergovernmental panel with the UN, which does calculate fugitive emissions from just releasing venting from fracking wells and systematic leaks, it is doubled in standard heating oil, the impacts over a 20-year period. So we'll need to include that. We can get to these achievements even very quickly with a 40% reduction to match up the Providence Resolution goals, which match the Paris Climate Accord, very easily in our industry. And even other industries are going to have a much more difficult time reducing it. Propane is going to be problematic, and a lot of us sell propane. So there's only so much propane you're going to be able to get out of different things like renewable propane. When they talk about renewable diesel and renewable propane, for those folks that don't know, that is basically taking a hydrocarbon chain and throwing it into a refinery where you get out the fractions. And the only way you can tell the difference between the original product and the conventional product and the renewable product is whether or not it's radioactive. But that is a very expensive process that where we as a heating oil industry are only 5% of the total distillate demand. We do not want to compete in that market. The manufacturers love it, but we don't like it because it'll just drive up our costs. So on that.
Hey, Sean,
yes.
can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Just back up a slide there.
Yeah, let me see.
I know you probably want to leave questions to the end here, but I'm going to forget.
No, that's fine.
Back up one there.
Yeah, let me go to it's easier for me to go to the top and then down. Right there. Okay.
The fact that propane doesn't have any, it's heavier than air, and there's no methane escaping to the atmosphere through leaks and even fracking wells, because butane propane is heavier than air. How does that match out against methane with, as you call them, fugitive leaks? How does that stack up?
So propane, again, nobody's done a really good study. Let me first say that. Nobody's really done the necessary work. The closest one has been the federal lab which has done the GREET standard, GREET standards, which CARB, California Air Resources Boards, has done. That's at Argonne Labs. But when you're in the fracking areas in, say, the Marcellus Shale, you do have fugitive emissions, which are NGLs. So you get regular pure carbon dioxide right out of the ground, right? That's one of the fugitive emissions. And then you have all of the other emissions that do not get into the refining elements. So propane, that isn't in this calculation, and nobody's doing that. Propane will have less of an issue than methane does, because methane is much lighter and is harder to separate out. So the heavier NGLs are actually easier to capture than the lighter NGLs.
But propane is heavier than air, so it can't enter into our troposphere. And in the methane fraction of natural gas, I just wondering what percentage of the escaping methane is considered in the natural gas greenhouse gas fraction.
In this calculation, it's not included in the intergovernmental panel. It's almost as much as what the emission is. So it's like 85 metric tons.
Yeah, so that has to position propane in a much, much better light in that regard. All right, Correct. I'll let you go on. I'm sorry to...
Yeah, methane, just so everyone knows, methane in the atmosphere over a 20-year period has nearly 100 times the impact of carbon dioxide. So that's, when we're talking emissions, we're always talking CO2e, carbon equivalent.
Sierra Club says that it is worse than coal.
Yeah,
that's their official position on methane.
Also, if I can just make a comment, that chart shows emissions due to combustion, not due to leaks. So I think propane, when it leaks in its raw form, has 0 CO2 emissions, same as with heating oil. If heating oil as a liquid leaks onto the ground, there's 0 CO2 emissions. The emissions are purely from combustion, which is what I think this chart shows. In the case of natural gas, you get a double whammy. You get the 85.4 from combustion, plus you get a lot more from the leaks as well. So,
David, you're precisely correct. And we need to take a look at the entirety, because we win when you include the entirety. So as Kearney continues and we're re-engaging them, we're making that decision tomorrow, and the groups are getting together next week. So we need to do that.
And Sean, I know we're gang tackling you on this one, but I will tell you that our #1 legislative effort this year is try to get Connecticut to view fuels from a life cycle analysis, so that the infrastructure leaks that occur as it's transported. It may be something that the region should consider, if all the states that still have aggressive natural gas expansion going on, and it can get the regulators to measure based on full life cycle, then it makes traditional heating oil, forget about biodiesel or renewable diesel blends of heating oil, look very good compared to all the leaks that are going on.
I completely agree with you, Chris. And the utilities and the regulators do not want us to talk about it. So when they usually avoid the topic, they know that that's the underbelly of the beast. We can convert to biofuels at a much faster rate than anybody else. And this chart just is really brief on what it costs on average to do an upgrade, and none of the other solutions really get you there as quickly as you'd like. And we're going into tough economic times where, ironically, our industry is one of the very few counter-cyclical industries. People are going to spend more time at home this winter, I guarantee it. And they tend to heat the place more when they're there all the time. So as long as you get paid, our sales are going to go up. But if government is going to have incentives in order to get people to convert to air source heat pumps, even if the electricity was cheap, which it is certainly not in the Northeast, it's amongst the highest in the world. You're going to need an incentive. If the average cost to do an air source heat pump is $19,600, you're going to need to have a federal subsidy or a state subsidy or a combination of the two that's equal to $19,600 to get anyone to do it. Otherwise, they won't do it. Where in our case, they don't need to do anything. So we can reduce emissions rapidly, and it's no cost to the consumer. And that's the political message we need to continuously send. We are the solution that doesn't cost the consumer anything. There's a series of plans. There's a federal policy. We'll probably have a statement out tomorrow, planning ahead with one of the people that we've worked with. We actually met with the policy people on Biden's climate plan in the campaign a week ago, a little less than a week ago. And they were not aware that we actually existed. That was one of the elements, so it's important for us to do that. And they didn't realize the nature of our business, and they were truly impressed and asked a lot of follow-up questions, wanted to have a lot of the additional data, and we've sent them a whole series of climate solution issue papers that we've done, whether it be through NORA or with the Kearney Project. So that was a very important meeting. If the politics change at the federal level, you need to, the discussions for who gets included actually occurs now, not after the election. After the election, the decision has already been made. So expect a communication from me tomorrow on that. So the Biden climate plan is a little bit less impactful than the House and Senate climate action plans. They are going to use the term green recovery because they realize that it's going to be a tough economy, and they're going to want to put a spin on everything that will ensure that it will create jobs from their perspective, because they're going to deploy a lot of federal capital. And if the utilities are going to get it, certainly we need to be smart enough so that we're in that plan. And whether it's be infrastructure or assisting consumers, we want to be the beneficiary, not just the utilities. You're all familiar with RGGI and TCI, and low carbon fuel standard in a regional basis is probably not likely, but there will probably be if we have the blue tsunami, we will have a national low carbon fuel standard. NEFI is also on the policy group that is helping to develop a low carbon fuel standard at the federal level. We want to be a participating fuel, just like we are in the RFS. For those of you who don't follow this stuff, heating oil is generally cheaper than diesel because we are not an obligated party for the diesel market, but we are a qualifying fuel that people can book against their diesel and gasoline obligations. So that actually reduces the price of heating oil. And if we have something like this, the reduction of the price for heating oil, because we can tolerate higher levels of renewable carbon, will drive our price down dramatically compared to every other source. Nobody else will be able to do what we do, and that's one of our key advantages. That's what we're working at the federal level. So I'll just skip along. We've taken a lot of time. So there will be a new RFS, or there'll be a national low carbon standard. We're working on that. The dilemma that the Kearney group brought up from regional basis is, in order to get the wholesale market at the same level where we have availability of bio, the recommendation was you needed to have a B20 mix in order to get to that point. Beyond that, you really need to recognize carbon intensity like we talked about, where you get rewarded. In the case of California, with certain bio products, you will get reimbursed through the state system, $2.60 a gallon currently. Those are huge numbers, right? That would dramatically reduce our price. So this is where we are with the Kearney project in the rollout. We're now working on stage 5, and those meetings are starting tomorrow. The election outlook, yes, we all have a headache. It will be over soon. But you know, if we don't prepare for what possible alternatives are, then we've prepared to fail. And these are, again, some of the decarbonization policies that are being discussed now. You know, it's really important to fight for the industry, and everyone, the people that are on this call aren't the people we need to get. We need to get the rank and file folks to join CEMA and be engaged in all of these discussions, because that's really critical for our success in the future. Chris can only do so much work. I can only do so much work. without the resources and the support from our member companies and the entire industry, because we've got a fight on our hands. And the most important thing I think you need to think about with these climate membership or climate discussions are that they're not going to replace us completely. They're going to replace us 90%. But that's not a successful business model. The cold climate heat pumps that they're talking about are really going to be designed for a heating and cooling for 80% of the heating needs. They want us to be there as the backup. In a 275-gallon tank, you've got the equivalent of 10 megawatts of power storable there. It is very difficult to store power. And we do a better job at storing it than anyone else. So if we reduce 80% of our gross profits, and you have to think of it along those terms, how would your business have to change to accommodate for an 80% reduction in gross profit revenues? You know, even if you quadrupled your margin, that's still not going to make up for that difference. So that means your business is going to be dramatically different, and you may not be able to compete. So the threat is here, and some of the folks that have been forecasting is if we are not successful, we've got probably 5 years to get a seat at the table instead of being on the menu as we currently are. Well, let me rephrase that. We probably have 6 months to a year to get at the table. Beyond that, it will be policy efforts for another couple of years that will ensure that we get there, because that's when rules are implemented. But if we fail in this first year, we probably only have a life cycle of about 5 years as an industry, in my opinion, because you cannot sustain an industry that only delivers fuel for 1 month a year. And I'll take any questions.
Hey, Sean, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Chris and I were having a discussion a little bit earlier on the possibility of renewable diesel refining technology coming into the heating oil sector. Just wondering if that has any real hope of materializing in light of also there might be some government assistance and some backing of that. And the reason why I asked that question is I really see the biofuel initiative as having regional climatic applications. You know, if somebody were to sell a biofuel blended product in the mid-Atlantic states, for example, they can be fairly flexible with what type of product they sell. You know, what Deanna Sherman delivers to her customers in northern Maine is going to have a different set of challenges. You know, and the renewable diesel product, obviously, you know, has a good low temperature capacity. And, you know, we seem to be deferring to EL a lot in our discussions, you know, whereas I think the renewable diesel product from a chemistry standpoint is just a much more, you know, practical product.
A couple of things on that. I agree with your analysis of practicality. I get that. Yesterday, I'm not sure if anyone saw the press release yesterday that I shared with some of our groups from Sprague. They actually have done a significant investment in EL yesterday, where they're going to move that process forward in Maine. That handles a lot of cold weather applications. And what you're getting at, Gary, if you're going to be building a biodiesel plant, you're going to be doing the standard biodiesel treatments where you do your filtering and you put in your catalyst agent and mix it with ethanol and separate out in glycerin and biodiesel. And you compare the cost of that plant to a renewable diesel. It's like $45 million. versus, 10 times that, right? $500 million.
Yeah.
So the significant difference is important, and they're going to want to get rewarded for that. We also can't, if this is a numbers game, let's say that nationally they said, okay, for the transportation sector, you're going to,
I'm coming back.
You think it's going?
Chris, okay. So we're 5% of the market. And if you have the rest of the market that needs to go to 20%, as an example, and you do the numbers of what is available for soy methyl esters, and you were to put that into and have to increase your bio content in diesel or jet fuel, that's going to bid the price for that up dramatically, where they cannot use high concentrations of biodiesel where we can. So that's really it's more of a arbitrage of size of market and what we can do that they can't do. In the EL aspect, we have to change a few seals, but you cannot do that to a jet engine. You cannot do that to a diesel engine. You need to make specific engines and specific jet engines that just work on that one product. So you want to save that for yourself, right? So that's why it's also, in my opinion, a better choice for us as an industry, because you cannot use it in the other markets.
Right. I've heard a lot of debate over EL blending. I've read a number of white papers that say that it can be successfully blended, and I've read some other papers that say that it cannot be successfully blended with, but at least petroleum distillates. What is the scoop on that?
I think the strategy for EL is to treat it like a separate product stream, really, in a practical way.
I.e. selling it as a 100% EL product, or
Correct.
using it as a cold flow depressant product for petroleum.
So let's say you've got, yes, I think you need to sell it as a separate product stream. Some companies have dedicated kerosene routes, as an example, traditionally. To me, that would be one of the first ones you convert to EL. And you're really going to want, even EL at lower percentages of blending still dissolves a lot of the filters we got. Like the microfiber Sid Harvey filter. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one. But that turns into jello. So you need to replace that with actually an older style filter, like the old General Wool ones. I'm not sure if you've seen.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
That actually works fine. You need Teflon. Teflon's pretty easy and pretty ubiquitous. You're going to need to replace those elements, but you're not going to want to.
Your elastomers.
You've got your pumps, your pump seals. You need to replace your elastomers in general with either silicone-based elastomers or Teflon.
What about Viton?
Eats up Viton.
Because most of your elastomers are either nitrile or Viton right now.
Correct.
So essentially, that renders your existing your equipment in the field as incompatible. Correct?
Correct. You need to replace the filter, your fuel pump seal, and your plunger assembly.
Yeah.
But if you were to do all of those things are still cheaper than $19,000 to put in a cold climate heat pump. So it's an easier sell. And if you're in the HVAC business and you're going to do normal servicing, those are not abnormal costs for even a normal servicing. So that's why I think it's a win for us, and why it's such a, sometimes if something is a headache for another industry that your industry can handle, then if you're the mice around the giant, around the elephants, you want to see where they're walking and not walk there. You can still make a really good profit and success, and actually be the climate hero that the other markets want to envy or want to emulate, but can't. So that's why I think EL, even though some people have said it's unicorn tears, to a degree, actually works for us in a political communication effort more than a lot of the other products, because you show you can go negative carbon scoring with it.
All right. Awesome. Does anybody have any other questions for Sean?
Sean, thank you. Thank you for all your work. I know that you have some of the best volunteers in the country helping you, as we do here in Connecticut. Ours are a lot better than yours, but you guys are second. You're second
yeah, well,
best.
half of them are from Connecticut, so
you guys are second best. But no, we thank you for the work that you do. I totally agree with where you started. Is that NEFI and FMA are in a place to do work that CEMA couldn't do. So without you, there would be gaps at Washington, D.C. that would not matter what we did on the state level. So thank you for being at the gates.
All right. Some insight as to the state's electrification efforts. And I'm happy that we have electricity back on the state of Connecticut so we can provide this presentation. You know, that's not always something you can count on here. So take it away, Chris.
Thanks, Gary. Okay, Sean, again, thank you very much. So we wanted to briefly go over and some of this stuff. I just wanted to kind of give you a bit of a history lesson on where we are and why this is happening. I'm sure that you received the dozens and dozens of communications that we send out over a week's period regarding electrification, but I wanted to just take a minute to step back and really look at why that is the case. So a number of years ago, it's funny, I've told this story that the first Global Warming Solutions Act passed under Governor John Rowland, before I was even with the association, and that's where it really all started. That has evolved and morphed and turned into something that has now put state agencies in a position where they are working to find solutions to reduce carbon dioxide greenhouse gas emissions. And the law that is driving that requires us to reduce those emissions 45% by 2030, and then by 2080 by 2050 we have to reduce it by another 80%. When that bill passed, or when those targets were established, they looked like they could never be achieved. And what has happened since that time is that we have been making consistent arguments about almost an impossibility of achieving them, because the electric grid was primarily fueled by natural gas. And Sean talked a lot about that in his presentation on what that really means from an emission standpoint and how much worse natural gas is. I didn't check today, but yesterday natural gas accounted for 60% of the electricity that was being consumed in Connecticut. So 60% of the electricity generated, natural gas was the primary fuel to generate it. That it means that electricity is not a zero emissions fuel, even though the promise that regulators have had with electrification is that because tailpipe emissions from a vehicle or smokestack emissions from a heating system are zero when electricity is used, it's not the case, because those have to be measured at the point of generation. So the government has been listening to us, and our arguments for a while were able to hold off big moves towards electrification. And so what happened was, last year, Governor Lamont signed an executive order that carries the weight of law in Connecticut that requires all electric generation to be zero emissions, which is primarily wind and solar. We're not big advocates of hydro, but wind and solar generation had to account for 100% of the electricity generated in Connecticut by 2040. So he has set the table by at least being able to look at environmentalists, the public, whoever else is holding the state accountable to get to this pipe dream goal. And he's able to say now that through the weight of law, electricity will not be able to be sold in Connecticut if it doesn't come from a zero emission source. That has opened the floodgates for a number of agencies to start to rapidly pursue how to electrify all of the points that the fuel is consumed, whether that's on the transportation sector or in the heating sector. So this is just a little picture of all the people and all the government agencies, the various guidance documents, policy documents, regional cooperative efforts to electrify the grid and electrify homes and vehicles in Connecticut. So the one that we talk a lot about is the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, who is sort of the gatekeeper for all of the policies that are moving forward. Again, we are now spending less time at the legislature and more time at the regulatory agencies trying to fight rulemaking processes and other plans that are being put forward. The Public Utility Regulatory Authority, which used to be the old DPUC that many of you may recall, is the agency that actually regulates the electric industry, sort of. And they now work under DEEP. And although their former mission was to just make sure that the lights stayed on and to protect uneconomic investments by ratepayers, now that agency is taking on DEEP's policy initiatives to reduce emissions in Connecticut. This is all coming from a group that you have probably not heard a lot of discussion about from us, but it's called the Governor's Council on Climate Change, GC3. It was established under Governor Malloy, and it has become the think tank for all of these agencies to figure out how to electrify us. To this point, we spent a lot of time as an association, and literally hundreds, not a couple hundred, not a few hundred, but nearly 900 members sent comments to the 2014 and then once again into the 2017 comprehensive energy strategy, which originally started out in 2014 as the natural gas conversion and expansion plan. That in 2017 continued to be the policy of the state of Connecticut, but they incorporated a number of initiatives to start to look at electrifying the economy. So since that document was published, the Governor's Council on Climate Change became responsible for coming up with specific recommendations on how to implement that so that the governor through executive order or the legislature through legislative action, PURA, Public Utility Regulatory Authority through regulatory action, or DEEP would be able to implement that. The good news here is even though all of these efforts are to get everyone to use electricity for their various, whether it's in your car or to heat your home, GC3 is now become, interestingly enough, is included recommendations that are consistent with efforts that CEMA has undertaken to incentivize biodiesel blending in Connecticut. So there is a good story here from the standpoint that up until this point, there was not a document, a guidance document, a policy document, a regulatory agency of government that was working towards anything to do with liquid fuels. And now the Governor's Council has put out draft recommendations that show biodiesel blending, renewable diesel blending, we'll call it low carbon liquid fuels as NEFI calls it, is a part of a bridge to electrification. We believe that the people who are making these decisions realize that basically doubling the electric grid today would be required if we were to put wind and solar generation online to be able to accommodate an electric future, and that's just the beginning. So they'd have to go to 8,000 megawatts today. Right now, there is just a fraction of that is wind and solar. So the amount of money that it would take is literally will run into the tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars, especially regionally wide. It'll run well through the hundreds of billions of dollars to be able to put enough electric and wind generation online to accommodate those megawatts that will be needed, number one. Number two, the electric lines that the electricity is transported through will need to be upgraded. They are not designed in its current configuration to be able to handle the amount of electricity that travels through it. Number three, the transformers that are out there need to be replaced. And then ultimately we get to what happens at the home. So at the home, you're going to need to increase electric service or upgrade your electric service. You have to install an electric heat pump that's only going to keep you warm part of the winter because you still need to keep your primary heating system, and then also putting an electric vehicle or two in the garage. So we are talking about a massive, massive undertaking of ratepayer investment to make this a reality. And as we all experienced this past summer, ratepayers are now openly expressing their displeasure and their intolerance of higher electric rates. Connecticut has had one of, if not the highest electric rates in America. I think we go back and forth with Hawaii and sometimes California as the most expensive electric rates in America. And what happened this summer when there was an increase on the electric bill, you all know that consumers were probably, in my career, I've only seen consumers react this way as a group. And you have to go back to the income tax proposal in 1990 that ultimately was adopted. That was the first one. More recently, tolls were probably the next most incendiary issue that the public really went out and opposed. And then now we find ourselves with our friends and our neighbors and people in our communities openly and outwardly expressing their displeasure with the utility costs and the cost of electricity in Connecticut. So this gives us a great advantage. So regulators and policymakers are starting to come to grips with the role that we have to play at minimum as a bridge. And one of the things that I keep telling our legislative committee and the board of directors is that we weren't even included in the plan just a few months ago. And now we are a part of it. And I think all we need to be as an industry is given the chance to show that the relative zero cost to taxpayers and no cost to ratepayers and very little investment on the part of homeowners will eventually allow us to win the day long term. So just getting to the table, as Sean says, was a big part of a big victory for our industry. And it finally, for the first time in several years, opened the door for us to be a part of the energy future in Connecticut. So don't get me wrong, the entire effort is still centered around ultimately electrifying everything, but because of the tremendous advantage that we have from a cost perspective of what it actually costs to put this all into motion, I think it gives us, ultimately that was what wins the day. So the discussion that was had prior to me discussing these issues was about some of the costs of potentially having to use different types of materials to accommodate the new fuels that we're going to have to sell to be compliant with these carbon dioxide reduction, greenhouse gas reduction emissions laws. But those costs do not pale in comparison to what is our chief competitor. The other good news about the Governor's Council's recommendations are that they call for a complete end to the natural gas conversion plan. So we will see during this past legislative session that was COVID interrupted, we did see the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection put legislation forward to stop the gas plan, and now the Governor's Council is recommending that occur. So we're seeing a couple of things converge at the same time that should be excited for family-owned retailers that we represent. Is that natural gas is on the brink of going away from an incentivized policy standpoint. Obviously, Yankee Gas and Southern Connecticut Gas, Connecticut Natural Gas are going nowhere, but the incentives that have supported them for the last 7 or 8 years are on a very short leash and are going to be reined in very soon.
Hey, Chris.
Yes, Gary.
You know, I just have to pause for a moment because I was brought back to my memory, I think, of one of the last chapter meeting that I attended a year ago when we were actually able to see real people in real life without masks and stuff. I think it was in Danbury. And I can remember you addressing the crowd. It could have been a year ago, could have been 2 years ago.
That was last year.
Was it last year? Okay. And you basically said that we were going to take control of this market and we were going to take command of this market and we were going to start taking market share away from natural gas. And I have to say, at the time, I wasn't buying it. Okay. And, well, not completely. I thought it was enthusiastic and I thought it was wishful thinking, but I just think it was going to materialize. Okay. And like Chris said, we've had a paradigm shift in the thinking at the state of Connecticut. And that was the fact that one Tuesday morning, they discovered that natural gas was bad. Okay. And it was as sudden as that. Okay. And, you know, and I'm thinking even for Sean's behalf, you know, I'm not sure how that same sentiment has propagated through some of the other states, but they turned and demonized natural gas in a New York minute in Connecticut from a position which was completely dominated by expansion and conversion and low gas prices. So it was a trifecta of bad positioning for us that was just reversed overnight.
Yeah, Gary, I will tell you that I think 99.9% of the members thought that I was crazy last year when I promised you that your markets were going to grow, and I am more confident than ever about that. But I will tell you, when I said it to you guys last year, it was with a prayer and taking my vitamins and hoping that that everything would break our way, and it eventually did. I just, you know, very rarely at the legislature do the facts win the day. It's usually what's politically expedient, what seems to appeal the most to the public and voters. This is one of those rare instances that the facts met some political expediency in terms of what was happening with just the limitations that electrification has, how fast they can get there, and that their deadlines, that their self-imposed deadlines of 2030 and 2050 were coming without any real solutions, when we were sitting there offering them a solution for many years now. So I think that it was, I just, you know, I wasn't the prognosticator that I would like to claim to be, but when I saw all of those facts lined up, I said they'd have no choice except to fail or to start to work with us. And I think what we're seeing now is that transition. I know I flipped the screen before, but I just will mention, I don't think we have any motor fuels marketers on tonight, but the Transportation Climate Initiative, the zero emission, Connecticut is a part of the Zero Emissions Vehicle Alliance, and PURA issued a report last year called the Electric Vehicle Roadmap. Is sort of the equivalency of the natural gas conversion plan, except for this is the one that applies to electric vehicles. They already have incentive programs in Connecticut called Cheaper, where they subsidize electric vehicles to people who are millionaires that can afford it. So that's a really nice, you know, social justice thing. So poor people will continue to subsidize through their electric bills so that people who make a lot of money can drive Teslas. So when we have put that in writing in our formal comments and all the electric vehicle various hearings and committee meetings to just demonstrate that, you know, the general public, we're socializing reducing costs to wealthy people, because if you're a poor single mom, you're never going to drive an electric vehicle anyways, or not at least immediately.
So Chris, on that, in DC and the Beltway, they have high occupancy vehicle lanes, and the primary reason for getting an electric vehicle is so that you can get in the high occupancy vehicles with lanes with one person. So has nothing to do with the environment.
Yep, exactly. So here's really the ask today. Part of the reason why we wanted to get together with you when the annual meeting got closed, it got canceled, or I got moved to online, is that we have a call to action. So Sean and others are at the federal level fighting all of the efforts of the people who don't want to see us, who don't want to see combustion a part of the energy future in America. You have CEMA, who you know is in Hartford every day fighting for your best interest in promoting your products. But what we have seen happen slowly over time is that the threat has now reached the municipal level. In Connecticut, we have 169 municipalities, and I went to a few websites and I grabbed some of the efforts that are going on out there. So for instance, Little Ridgefield, Connecticut, and Fairfield County has the Ridgefield Action Committee for the Environment. Virtually every town in Fairfield County has something like this, where they have put together a committee of people so that if or not if, in addition to the efforts on the national and on the state levels, they're going to supplement it by being able to curb emissions right there in Ridgefield. New Haven, on New Haven's Energy Advisory Council meeting agenda, they are working on and putting together a sustainability plan in addition to a conservation and emissions plan. The town of Waterford out in eastern Connecticut has a climate change vulnerability risk assessment adaptation study going on right now that will ultimately lead to recommendations on how to curb the impacts, the existential threat of climate change and sea level rise on Waterford. Then there is a very active group in West Hartford who has put together a emissions plan for their town. And then there's my hometown of Naugatuck, right there in the Naugatuck Valley, blue collar people who are concerned about the climate. I'm going to talk a little bit more about West Hartford and Naugatuck as I go on. But before I do that, I just wanted to say that just this week, the city of Quebec has banned heating oil. They are no longer going to allow heating oil to be used in Montreal, Canada. It wasn't that long ago that that we had action taken in Sean, remind me, in Massachusetts.
Brookline.
Brookline, Massachusetts took action to stop, and even though their attorney general was able to overcome town council action on stopping fossil fuels from being used in that city, it was overturned on technical reasons, and there are ways around that. We have Middletown, Connecticut is recently considering taking action. Southington, Connecticut, Burlington, Vermont has been well publicized about the actions that they've taken to stop fossil fuels from being combusted or levying heavy penalties for fossil fuel heated homes and businesses. So what we're seeing now is something that can't be stopped in Washington, D.C. necessarily, or Hartford, Connecticut. It's happening in your backyard. And the only way that the trade associations that represent you can be effective is by having someone with their eyes open. And this is the ask. We can no longer afford to ignore what's happening in your backyard, on Main Street, your town. So what we need you to do is you need to get involved. And that kind of brings me back to what's happened in West Hartford and what's happened in Naugatuck. So in West Hartford, we have a member who is on the call today, Steve Sack, who has been involved in monthly meetings of their conservation commission that when they were in the process of coming up with their city plan on energy and environment issues. Steve has worked so closely with this group. He's been able to get them to modify the plan so that there is a biodiesel component to it, so that whether it's municipal vehicles, buildings, that now this group has included in their plans the ability to continue to use liquid fuels, and it's not a runaway electricity plan that it initially seemed like it was going to be. In Naugatuck, right here, this is just, I pulled up the list of all the people who sit on the Naugatuck Conservation Commission. I know it's really small and you can't see it, but if you get right down to the bottom of the page, there is this name, Carl J. Herb. That's my father. My father is on the town council. I held this seat about 18 years ago. He took that seat recently. He ran for office and won. And he came to me and he said, "How can I help you and your members?" And I said, "Dad, you know what? It'd be great if you could be the liaison from the town council to the Naugatuck Conservation Commission." What came from that was that he plugged into discussions about natural gas expansion, electrification, greenhouse gas reductions, and he had me come and make a presentation that has been able to allow us to engage in projects where the municipality in Naugatuck was considering converting buildings, converting vehicle fleets, and we've been able to, not every building were we able to stop from converting, but I can tell you that we have stopped a number of them just because we were merely aware of it. So what we're asking for you to do is to take that approach. I've committed my own family in defense of this industry. And I'm asking for you, whether it's you personally, someone in your family, a friend, a relative, an employee who may already be involved in something that's going on. You know, the one thing we know about this industry is that we are tremendously involved in lots of different local activities, whether it's, you know, coaching the T-ball league or serving on the planning commission or whatever it might be. But now we need to turn those efforts and those focuses into what is happening with my town's energy and environment plan. CEMA will be here. We will train you. We will provide you with the data, talking points. We'll come to the meetings when the moment is right, but it needs to be local. Your local town council, your mayor, your first selectman, they're going to want to hear from you first as the local business person, as the resident. And we'll be there every step of the way with you to support those efforts so that you can kind of have the kind of success that Steve Sack has had in West Hartford. This is a victory that needs to be replicated in 169 municipalities. Let NEFI and EMA do their work in DC, let CEMA work in Hartford, and then work with CEMA to support your efforts in your town, at your town hall, where they're trying to convert all of your customers to electricity, and you probably don't even know about it. So that's the call to action this year. It's that we can no longer afford to just focus on, geez, I hope that Trump doesn't lose because Biden's going to be the end of us with the Green New Deal. Or, you know, that damn Lamont, it's just a matter of time. We got to get him out of office because we'll get a Republican in there and be able to turn this all around. Well, even if all that does happen, if the president gets reelected and he stops all the greenhouse gas regulations that are being attempted at the federal level. And even if CEMA is successful and Lamont loses and we get a Republican in there, and all of the environmental efforts that the state's going through to electrify the heating and transportation sector stop dead, well, guess what? Then where it's going to happen in Monroe to Gary. It's going to happen in Norwalk to Randy. It's going to happen in Waterbury to Teresa. It's going to happen in Hamden to Ed. To all the people that we have on the line, it's going to happen to you, to the people that you know best, that are taking these actions behind your back because we're just unaware. When we get involved, as Steve has demonstrated, we can succeed. So are there any questions on that? I mean, this is probably a time to talk about it. You shouldn't be afraid to at least become aware. You may not want to be the person who speaks up at the meeting. You may not want to be the person who makes the presentation, and you don't necessarily have to be. But what we need you to be is to be the canary in the coal mine. We need you to be at the front of the line in your town so that once you're aware and you make us aware, then we can help construct a plan with other volunteers, with our own staff, to get involved in your local town hall and the efforts that are happening at that level. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer it. If not, I know I'm running a little long here. I'm going to move quickly into the next topic. Ed, did I put you to sleep?
Chris, I just, that's really key. My sister tonight, while we're speaking, is actually at the town energy plan where they want to eliminate fossil fuels. And they're a unique site where they may be able to deploy something like an EL site, because it's an old paper mill town, as an example. But when it's important to report back to Chris, and because these things replicate across the country, and you need to stop them everywhere. And Chris has the tools to do it, and we all need to know what the discussions are. So it's really key. And you're going to hear crazy stuff, which you just need to compartmentalize and not tell them they're all nuts. That we have a solution, and that's the key.
Correct.
Hey, Chris, I know, can I share my screen for 1 second with you guys?
Go for it.
I'm just going to see if I can actually pull this off here. Let me see if I can pull this one off here. This doesn't work in about 2 seconds here. Just let me know.
There you go. Hey, you downloaded the app, Gary.
Yeah, I wanted to show everybody this. Oh, can you still see that?
Yep,
okay.
We can see it.
Yeah, this is what Chris was talking about before, and I just wanted to show you this, a quick snapshot. This is New England ISO app on the phone. This is actually a real-time load of the electrical demands for New England. And this is basically showing you kind of in real time what's going on with this. This is a handy app to have. And the reason why I just wanted to show this to everyone is to kind of illustrate how far of a journey they have to go to convert the state of Connecticut to wind and solar and renewables. Okay, and you can see right now we have 62% coming on for natural gas, 18% nuclear, 15% hydro, only 5% renewables. But you say, well, that's thankfully we got 5% of that wind and solar out there pushing that electricity out there. So let's look at our renewables. Wow, 60% of that's coming from burning garbage, 32% of it's coming from burning wood, 5% is coming from landfill gas, 4% from wind, and 0% from solar. Okay, so just putting that in perspective, and this needs to transform somehow magically with wind and solar to double our capacity under the possibility that we may even have some challenges with our nuclear, which can actually, under a heavy lift, get up to 30 or 40% of our power. That's the challenge that I just wanted to put this in, because this is just kind of a dose of reality that everybody needs to see when they're looking at this.
Yeah, Gary, thank you. I mean, I almost use this app every day, and it comes up in every conversation that we have with legislators to show them that they're being duped by the environmentalists and the regulators into thinking that this is an achievable goal that they have without us. So with that, elections do matter. Obviously, we're less than 2 weeks out from the federal election, and we get asked often, and Gary asked me not too long ago, what can I say or what can't I say to my employees? And there is well-defined rules, but surprisingly enough, it's a little bit more liberal than what you would expect. So this is regulated both at the federal and the state level. And I'm not going to read all of this, but when you kind of summarize, if you're going to have a discussion with an employee, you need to be where you can't go beyond the point is you can't threaten their jobs. You don't tell them who to vote for. It's not that it's prohibited, but you shouldn't tell them who to vote for, just because you'll probably not be able to effectively communicate with them. But you cannot threaten their job. So one of the things that we have been advising members, and we're going to be sending out an email tomorrow to all of the members, breaking down the federal, where the 2 presidential candidates stand on 4 or 5 relevant issues to your business. But it will also include a breakdown of a bunch of local races that are being predicted as relatively close. I will tell you the disappointing news is that if you do not like the current composition of the leadership in Connecticut, even if all the close races break to a more conservative candidate, there will still be a majority of the people who want the electrification plans to move forward. So from that standpoint, it's going to be a bit of an uphill battle. But so one of the pieces of advice when you're talking to your employees, if you decide to do that, is that you should not call a meeting just to discuss the political race, or you will be considered a lobbyist and you will have to register. So in Connecticut, that is something that it's not prohibited, but it is something that you should just work into a routine meeting. So if you're having a safety meeting, or for whatever reason you bring your employees together, if you wanted to include a discussion about the election and where the candidates stand, this document that we're sending out to you will provide you with talking points. They will provide you with where the candidates stand on what we believe are the important issues, and it will also give you a template speech or a template document for you to read from, so that you're accurately reflecting where these candidates have stand, at least from what we've been able to do research publicly on their positions. So that today's newsletter, we had a sneak preview of it, and tomorrow you'll have much more information to be able to share with your employees if you choose so. The one thing I will emphasize is that CEMA is a nonpartisan organization. We are not bipartisan. We are nonpartisan. We work with anyone who will work with us. If we have lots of friends. Yesterday, State Senator Anwar from South Windsor, who's a Democrat, and came right on the call and told us how progressive he was, but also in the same breath told us how much he thought our industry is a part of the future in Connecticut, and that the story that we have to tell and the attributes of our new fuel clearly will cut out a place for us in the future. So again, in tomorrow's communication, you're going to see a whole bunch of information on these local races. Again, I think there were 20 of them that were featured in a recent publication that we sort of used as the benchmark on who we were going to talk about. We've included links and breakdowns of what's happening in their districts, the major issues they deal with. In addition to that, we also have put where they stood on a number of votes on issues that CEMA worked on, whether it was paid medical leave, our thermal renewable energy credit bill, natural gas leaks. So you will see in tomorrow's email where all of these particular candidates end up standing on the issues that we believe are most important to you. We know that you and your employees have a lot of issues that determine ultimately who you will support in this upcoming election. All we want to do is make sure that you include your business interests in that decision-making process. Again, I know there are a lot of people who are one-issue voters, but there's a whole matrix, I'm sure, in your mind of why you think somebody is a good candidate or a bad candidate. We just want to make sure you know where they stand on energy and environment issues, so that when you make those decisions, that's part of the calculus that you use to make those determinations. And that basically, like I said, that report card will go out to you tomorrow. So if anyone has any questions on that, I'd be more than happy to answer them. If not, I'm going to cede control over to David so that he can talk to you a little bit more about some other items we've been working on for you.
And as far as communicating with your employees, Chris has told me that I shouldn't go out to the parking lot and continue to rip the bumper stickers off of people's cars. Not a good idea.
Or yard signs.
Yeah.
So in the course of our normal business, we help members a lot on various operational issues and questions that they bring to us. For example, just in the last week, we've helped members with diesel excise taxes, sales tax on service, and even non-tax issues like how to get leads on new homeowners from real estate agents, and just yesterday, the requirements for wearing reflective vests. But by far and away, the biggest issues that we dealt with and the most number of questions we received dealt with questions revolving around COVID, both how to handle the disease itself in your workplace, as well as coping with all the different regulations. So on our website, which you see here, we have this red band at the top, which gives you all our resources. You can click on that, and here's our general news and update section, mostly regarding COVID. And then down here, we have some of the very specific issues that have been raised. We work with our national groups such as NEFI and PMAA in getting our industry recognized as an essential business by the Department of Homeland Security, and that kept all of you open in the spring, which was great because we had some cold weather back there and racked up some degree days. So that was very important.
And I'm going to interrupt David for a second before he moves on. So I just wanted to emphasize that, the work that our national associations do to make sure that we were a part of the essential workforce is to be commended, and without them, we would have had no shot. But I just want to remind everybody that as soon as the governor declared a public health emergency, there was a state senator from Danbury who made a very aggressive move and tried to get us exempted and pulled out of the federal definition as it pertained to its application in Connecticut. We learned of that, and within 12 hours, over 1,000 communications were sent to the governor and legislators. Your communications in response to that senator who was on the verge of requiring you to shut down like you were a restaurant during those months of closure in the early days of COVID was overturned. In my 20 years of representing you, I've never received a phone call from the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and the Chief of the Staff of the Governor's Office until you responded to our call to action. So I just wanted to emphasize two things. Number one, thank God we have people like NEFI working for us at the national level to secure our place as essential workers. Who would have ever have thought that was a thing, number one. And then number two, when there are people locally who are looking to try to defeat us by hook or by crook, regardless of the peril that it would have put our customers in, you stood up and spoke so loudly that the government responded. So in the future, remember that email, that phone call is effective when we speak as strongly as we did and with one voice.
And that's how we and all the liquor stores continue to survive. Okay, all essential.
So down here on the left, you see a lot of the executive orders from the governor, and we try to keep our members updated on that. Especially key for our industry was that we have a inside guy at the Department of Motor Vehicles, and with him we're able to get extensions on your CDL driver's license renewals. So I think through June 1st, if your license expired through June 1st, you can actually extend that to November 30th, which is coming up. And if your license expired after June 1st, you actually have until the end of the year to renew your CDL. So there are a lot of these kinds of things here on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, the CARES Act was particularly a very complex federal legislation, and that we helped a lot of our members deal with that. Paycheck Protection Program. I remember helping members actually trying to fill out their forms in detail, section by section. Gray produced a very nice webinar on how that works, for example. If you didn't do the Paycheck Protection Plan, you could have still gotten a employee retention tax credit instead if you wanted, or you could have gotten an SBA loan, the first $10,000 of which was actually just a grant. So a lot of resources available to members. There's a whole section on unemployment benefits and how those apply and when they don't apply, especially in the case of COVID. And we have paid sick leave, which is a very complicated set of legislation, which had a whole bunch of moving parts that you had to comply with in order to get the benefit of that. Travel restrictions, paid leave, as I mentioned, operational issues in your workplace or at your customer places. What happens if you have an employee tested positive for COVID or even in contact with someone who had COVID. So a lot of information there from the CDC. C-store guidance for our members because they're also in daily contact with customers, so they're particularly vulnerable to the virus. So we have a lot of precautions there that are recommended by our national associations. We have PMA, NACS, NEFI, a lot of resources collected by our national association. So a lot of information right on our website that are available to our members and that we have put on there over the course of the last 8 or 9 months.
Yeah, I would say that especially the employee issues, whether it was the shared work program, furloughing an employee, unemployment, continue to be some of the biggest questions that we have. And I know that Sean and others are working on a federal level about some hoping to include into any relief package that comes forward, protections against employees from liability. As you can tell, Carter Mario and Trantolo are already on television advertising to sue your employer if you got COVID. In Connecticut, we have a presumption that if someone gets sick, it happened at work. So, you know, those efforts are going to be important, but please refer to the website and feel free to call David or myself, but David first, if you have any questions about any of those.
And if you got COVID and got into a motorcycle accident because of that, you're in for a big win, man. You're going to hit the jackpot. Seriously.
So Gary, I think that's all we had on that. I know that I believe Hunter is on the line, so.
All right. Yes, Hunter McHugh from Federated. Again, I want to quick shout out to Federated for their long, fantastic support and the support of our chapter meetings here. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Hunter, and you can take it away, my friend.
Yep. Thank you, Gary. And thanks, Chris and David, for having me on here again. Pleasure to get in front of a new group of folks here. And just a brief introduction to myself before I kind of give everyone an update as far as what's going on at Federated. Gary had mentioned, my name's Hunter McHugh. I'm the account executive with Federated Insurance. I handle all of our association partnerships throughout the Northeast. I have the pleasure of working closely with Chris and David as far as things that we can do to help out association members. A lot of the topics that were discussed over the past couple of days, have been really eye-opening to me and to everyone at Federated. And I've mentioned this over the past 2 days, but I could not be more impressed with everything that CEMA has put out and made available to its members through the last few trying months. Has been, again, impressive is the word I'll stick with, because we've sat on these calls with a lot of other associations, and to me, it just seems as if everything CEMA's putting out just blows them away. So we couldn't be more proud to partner with CEMA. Couldn't be more proud to be sponsoring these chapter meetings. And I'm excited to give everyone just a brief update as far as where Federated is at to date, how things have been at Federated over the past few months, and just looking at it from a big picture standpoint. Federated being a mutually owned company, it's never been really in a more stable financial, spot. And so we're very thankful. We want our clients and everybody that Federated partners with to know that although there's been a lot of really trying times, that Federated is still in a spot where we're here to help our clients. We're here to take care of claims and do everything that we can to support our clients and our associations in any way that they look to us for. So with that being said, just some of the big things and really the main topic I want to chat about, and I'll keep it brief, is the issues that Federated is seeing. And anybody who's seen any Federated presentation in recent months knows that Federated has got a strong stance against distracted driving and the issues that result from that. And I'll start just with a statistic, which I'm glad I've got hammered down for today. And it comes from our CEO, Jeff Fetters, who recently put out a video message personally from him to all of our almost 40,000 clients. For the first time ever, he personally addressed all of them. And the statistic he mentioned, and the reason for the video, was that during COVID and during the past few months, we thought that with everything going on, a lot less vehicles on the road, that we might see a drop or at least a little bit of a slowdown in auto liability claims. And the statistic he gives is that just Federated alone, we've had 50 accidents in the last 90 days that resulted in death or serious disability. That's just at Federated and just in the past 90 days. We've had plenty more than 50 accidents. Those are just the ones that have resulted in death or serious disability. And of those 50, 100% of those accidents were totally avoidable. And what do I mean by that? Is that every single one of those were tied to either distracted driving, fatigue driving, overly emotional driving, or speeding, whatever it may be. And as everybody on here knows, that distracted driving is a pandemic of its own, or it's an issue of its own that we're trying to battle, and we're trying to do everything we can to help our clients prevent those accidents from happening. But unfortunately, we're never going to be able to prevent 100% of them. And the reason we've kind of transitioned from, hey, how can we help our clients' employees be better drivers? We've transitioned from that to take a look backwards to how can we help employers and our clients better protect their businesses from what's going on, or at very least educate them on the issues that we're seeing now as a result of these. And so a couple of the hot topics now in the insurance industry, and just Google them and read the first couple articles that you find, but nuclear verdicts and social inflation. And what those two things refer to, social inflation from our perspective is referring to the height that these liability claims are getting to. And there are what we refer to as nuclear verdicts, any claims that we get involved in that settle for $5 million or more. And what once used to be a time where we would only get 1 or 2 or 3 of those a year, now we're getting 1 to 3 of them a month. And it's not that accidents have gotten any worse, that people are getting even worse injured than they used to. There are so many different things that go into that, that are causing these numbers to skyrocket. And we just want to bring it to our clients' focus so that they know what potential claims they could find themselves in should they not take the necessary precautions to avoid them. And so what causes social inflation? What's leading to these ridiculously increased costs of these lawsuits? Number one, and to me, honestly, the most shocking is third-party litigation financing. And what that means basically is that now we've got investment firms that are going and buying up lawsuits from impacted parties. So we'll use an example of an individual gets into an accident and they become paralyzed from the waist down. And this investment firm will come in, pay for the settlement rights, and say, for example, give $5 million to the impacted party as a result of their claim. Now that person will still go to court, they'll still testify, they'll still plead their case, but in most cases, almost every single case, those claims are now settling for $20, $30 million. And to me, the sickening part about it is that in most states, the knowledge that that money is going to an investment firm rather than the impacted party is typically not admissible. And so the jurors that are in there who have their own set of issues in that they lack financial context, we've got millennial jurors who are seeing, athletes who are making hundreds of millions of dollars in their contracts, actors making a ton of money just to act in a movie, $100 million, whatever it may be. But jurors are also taking advantage of lawyers are taking advantage of those jurors in that they're using what, again, Google this, it's another hot topic with us, I'm not making it up, I promise, reptile tactics. And what that refers to is basically a plaintiff attorney trying to incite fear into a juror to make their decision based on emotion rather than rationale. And so all these things come together to result in ultimately a steeply increasing level of claims. And so we're working with our associations at the state and national level to try and make sure that where we can, we're impacting tort reform in whatever way possible so that we can protect our business owners. Because when we get into claims that we're talking about $5, $10, $15 million claims, those are the types of claims that cause business owners to close their doors. And it's become something that, again, doesn't solely apply to Federated. It's an industry-wide thing. But when we talk about the long-term impacts of that, and for folks that are in here that handle the insurance for their business, I'm positive to say that you're seeing it already as far as the impact that can have on rates moving forward, whether you've been involved in a claim like that or not. And I'm not here to scare everybody or get everybody to think, hey, Federated's rates are going up. But if you read the first couple articles that you can find on what's happening with commercial insurance rates, you're going to find that in the first 2 quarters this year, auto and commercial umbrella rates on average throughout the entire country went up about 8 to 12%, somewhere in that ballpark, maybe 10%. And so it's become really concerning, and we are doing everything we can to try and educate our clients just to get them to understand the scope of what's going on and to let them know that we're here to try and protect them and do what we can to keep their insurance affordable and keep their businesses up and running. God forbid they fall into one of these claims. And so as far as what Federated does to try and impact that, there are so many simple steps that a business owner can do to protect their business. And it starts with something as small as putting in place a sample driving policy, something that we delivered to almost 40,000 clients last year to make sure that they had in place. It's as simple as getting a driving policy, putting it on company letterhead, discussing it with employees, making sure they understand it, having them sign off, and keeping that on file. So in that case, when an accident does happen, now your employee will be the one who is seen as negligent rather than the company for a lack of training or for not doing their due diligence and making their employees known what their expectations were.
So Hunter,
of,
I'm gonna step on you for a second here. I just want everybody to know, and CEMA has an obligation, not only because we endorse Federated, but we have an obligation that this issue should not only be offensive to you, but it should scare you. And it should scare you to act in a manner that is consistent with what Hunter is talking about, is that there are steps that you can really take to stop this. You know, in the old days, we used to be fearful of that shark tooth law firm that was vicious and was going to get its teeth into you and not let you go. But now that law firm is being backed by a hedge fund. They're by an investment house. Hedge funds are using the legal system as an investment vehicle because the rates that they can earn on a government bond or in the stock market they pale in comparison to money that they can make by manipulating somebody's pain and injury that may have been caused by a driver who made an innocent mistake. But if you're not taking the steps that Hunter is talking about, you are exposing your company to an unprecedented exposure that we have never seen before. And it's not just, deliverable fuel companies that are in this position. It's going to be everybody who has an employee that's in a vehicle. So these simple tools aren't going to stop every accident from happening, but they're going to help. That mitigation of risk never was more valuable than it is now. So sorry, Hunter.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you, Chris. And to Chris's point, as he mentioned, it has become such a profitable, which is sad to say, it's become such a profitable industry. It's a $2 billion industry, so much so to the point where we now have those investment firms reaching out to Federated to see if we want to invest in them. And naturally, we've declined given a serious conflict of interest. But to Chris's point, it may get old, and do I sometimes get sick of talking about it? I do, because it's something that we've talked about for so many years, and we're so passionate about because of the long-lasting and the extreme impact it can have on our clients. So it's as simple as, like I mentioned, the driving policy or having regular safety meetings, getting it in front of employees to make sure that they're staying aware of it. If nothing else, as Chris mentioned, to try and insulate your business from being seen as negligent because you didn't do a due diligence to help to necessarily train your employees to make sure they knew what their expectations were. So we have a unlimited amount of resources when it comes to safe driving, different practices that can be done that are as simple as something that can be done once a quarter, twice a year, whatever it may be, all the way down to monitoring drivers lists, making sure that you're keeping a good background on who's getting behind the wheel of a company vehicle. Oftentimes, that's one of the bigger issues. We have somebody who gets behind the wheel of a company vehicle who's got a laundry list of incidents on their motor vehicle record, and now that's going to come right back to the employer. You knew they had this history. Why did you put them behind the wheel of your vehicle? So I don't want to go much longer, but I do just want to say if there's anything else that Federated can do to help educate business owners, employees, we're here to help in any way possible. We've worked with CEMA on this for many years. Can't thank you guys enough again for allowing us to give a brief update. It's been a great couple of days of meetings in this awful new position we're in where everything's done virtually, but it is great to see folks and to get back out and kind of spread our message. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to David or Chris to grab my contact information. We're more than happy to help. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
One thing, not to close it on a downward note, but I could tell you that my advice, is that my company was involved probably 30 years ago in a double fatality, and I will tell you the woulda, coulda, shoulda list, okay, shouldn't be written when you're standing behind the yellow tape. Okay, and I've stood behind the yellow tape. Okay, and I can tell you, attest to that, that is a place nobody wants to ever be. Okay, and that day, even though it was 30 years ago, haunts me to this day. Okay, and the woulda, coulda, shoulda has become so obvious after you've had an accident, and and when that happens, that's a bell that can't be unrung. So that's my
more morbid as it may be, Gary. It is such a great point because it just speaks to how important it is to be proactive, to get out in front of these things. We're never going to prevent them all from happening, but there's a lot that can be done on the front end to avoid that feeling. You know, like you said, when you're behind the yellow tape.
And lastly, you know, this is humans. We're human beings. Okay, when you're in a company and you realize that your company somehow was involved in an injury or loss of life, and you have some sense of responsibility to that, you know, as humans, it's a tragic thing that, you know, it's not an insurance claim. Okay, it's a human incident, it's a human tragedy. Okay, and you know, from having experienced one myself, I could say that's, you know, the precautions. And when I do my safety training course, people are sick of me hearing me because I recite the story. Okay, for 30 years I recite the story. Okay, and because it's as vivid in my mind as if it happened yesterday. Okay, but that was what I had to add. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. And on that sad note.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
listen,
thanks.
no, I mean, I think that the message is that, you know, we can control some of this, and whether it's what we learned about today from Sean, or what I discussed, what's happening on the local level, or just loss prevention efforts that you can take, is that we are the masters of our own destiny, and we do have the ability to control these outcomes. The promise I made last year, I will make it again, that I believe that we're going to grow your volumes in the future, as much as all of these insurmountable obstacles seem like we won't overcome them. I know that there are a lot of good people, a lot smarter than me, that are working on your behalf to make sure that you're successful today and every day that comes before in the future. So I would say, Gary, thank you for your leadership on the board, and Sean, thank you for engaging our members today on the very important work that NEFI is engaged in, and Hunter, thank you for providing us with the tools to prevent the accidents that, you know, will make a difference for many years to come. So
Chris, thank you. It's always a pleasure to work with the best.
Hey, Chris, you're recording this?
we are.
Can you send us the link to the record?
Absolutely, Randy. Well, what we were planning on doing is cutting, because we had 3 different speakers this week, so we're going to put on the website all of it, and we'll promote it with links so that you know where on the website to go to if you want just to see, you know, if you don't want to hear Chris Herb talk about the effort on the local level, and you just want to hear what Sean had to say, you'll be able to choose those. So we'll have those up sometime after the annual meeting.
All right, thanks.
Randy, it's good to hear your voice. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, what was I, 104?
Hey. We'll take it.
Thank you. It was definitely informative.
Don't tell Federated there was only 4. They may pull their sponsorship.
All right. If that's
Have a good night. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all, and God bless and be well. All right.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.